Hello, my name is Sarah Priddle. I work for the Somerset NHS Foundation Trust, and I'm going to be talking to you today about sleep. Can you remember the last time you woke up feeling refreshed from a good night's sleep? If the answer is no, you are not alone. It is estimated that 2/3 of adults in the developed nations struggle to get the recommended 8 hours of nightly sleep. We tend to think about the night as the time when the mind and body shut down, but this is not the case. In fact, sleep is a really active period, during which lots of really important processing, restoration and strengthening occurs. Amongst other things, sleep restocks our immune system, which helps fight off infection, and fine-tunes our hormone levels. This makes us less likely to develop conditions such as diabetes, obesity and other illnesses. It is also the time when we dream. And the more we find out about this, the more we understand how important it is for processing information from the day and making sense of the experiences we have had. In the short term, sleep deprivation can cause lack of concentration, poor memory, reduced muscle strength, and mood changes such as irritability, low mood, and anxiety. It can also make us less resilient to pain and able to deal with emotions. We also know that long-term persistent pain and sleep disturbance often go hand in hand. You might recognise the vicious circle on this slide. Pain can make sleep difficult, and poor sleep seems to worsen pain. When you sleep less, your body creates more inflammatory chemicals which not only increase pain levels, but prevent the production and action of sleep-promoting hormones. It might also be that you notice your pain more. Because you're lying in bed, there are fewer distractions around and you become much more aware of sensations in your body. Once you're awake and in pain, it is very easy for all sorts of worrying thoughts and upsetting emotions to set in, and these too contribute to keeping you awake and increasing your pain levels. Finally, we all know that when you are tired, it's easy to slip into habits which negatively affect sleep. For example, exercising less and sleeping during the day. I'll be talking more about this later in the video. So we know that sleep is really important, but what exactly is a good night's sleep? In fact, the answer is that everyone is different. Although we generally say 7 to 9 hours is ideal, this varies between individuals and may change as we get older. For example, we know that newborns sleep for up to 18 hours of the day, whereas older adults may sleep for less than 7. The important thing is that we wake up feeling refreshed. Having good quality sleep depends as much on getting the right type of sleep as getting the right amount. In this slide, you will see that we sleep in cycles. Each cycle of sleep consists of 4 stages, and I will describe each one in turn. In stage 1, we are in a very light stage of sleep and can be very easily roused. Sometimes we may still have some conscious awareness. Stage 2 is quite a light stage too, but our brain is beginning to produce the hormones we need for deeper sleep, making us more difficult to wake up. Stage 3 is deep sleep, and we can often feel quite disorientated if we are woken during this stage. This is when most of the restoring and strengthening that I mentioned earlier takes place. After stages 1, 2 and 3, we go into a very interesting 4th stage known as REM. This stands for rapid eye movement and is the time when we are more likely to dream. This stage is really important for regulating our emotions, reviewing what has happened during the day and creating memories. Not getting enough REM sleep can reduce the brain's ability to deal with different experiences and therefore contribute to anxiety and low mood. After the REM stage, we start back at stage 1, the half-awake light sleep phase. For some people, this might be the time when they realise they need to go to the loo, or for others when they notice their pain. Experts think that regularly returning to light sleep is an evolutionary mechanism designed to allow us to wake up at regular intervals to check for approaching danger. Of course, in our modern world, this is rarely necessary, but it is something which is still very important in wild animals. Can you imagine how risky it would be for a zebra to fall asleep outside for 8 hours without looking out for lions? This is important as it demonstrates that it is perfectly normal to wake up several times in the night. It is only a problem if you then can't easily drift back to sleep. Each cycle of sleep lasts for between 1.5 to 2 hours, so the number of cycles you get will depend on how long you're asleep. For example, if you only sleep for 3 hours, you will probably go through the cycle 2 or 3 times, whereas if you sleep for 8 hours, it will be more like 4 to 5 times. It is important to remember that spending time in each stage can be as important as the total amount of sleep. For example, 6 hours of sleep where you go through each stage of the cycle will probably be more refreshing than 8 hours spent mostly in stages 1 and 2. There are a number of things which can affect these different stages of sleep. First of all, let's think about stress. This is associated with the fight or flight response and leads to the release of chemicals or hormones which prepare us for exactly the dangers light sleep is designed to look out for. This can mean that when we enter stage 1, our brain thinks we need to wake up fully to deal with whatever that danger is. Now, in primitive times, this might have been a saber-toothed tiger or a fire. But for most of us now, it is much more likely to be worries about things like family or money. Our survival doesn't depend on dealing with these in the middle of the night, but once we are awake, these worries can quickly take hold and make it difficult to go back to sleep. Pain can have the same effect as stress, unhelpfully being interpreted by the brain as something we need to be concerned about. Also, when we enter light sleep, we become much more aware of being uncomfortable and can find it difficult to go back to sleep. We might also start feeling stressed that we are awake, again, and in pain, again, and get into the vicious circle I described above. Certain medications can have specific effects on the sleep cycle. For example, some drugs prescribed for high blood pressure can reduce the amount of REM sleep you have. This is also the case with certain antidepressants and opioid drugs such as codeine and morphine. Interestingly, amitriptyline, which is commonly prescribed to help with pain, might help you get off to sleep, but also affects the REM stage. Some people also report vivid dreams or nightmares, which cause them to wake up. If you think your medication might be having a negative impact on your sleep, we recommend that you speak to your GP or the healthcare professional that you are seeing about your pain. So what we are beginning to see is that sleep is not a time when our body simply shuts down, but an active process which is vital for our physical health and sense of well-being. What I'm going to do now is spend some time talking about how this process is controlled, and I'm going to start with circadian rhythms. These are like an internal body clock which regulates the things which happen in our bodies over each 24-hour period. You can see from this slide that the sorts of things I'm talking about are body temperature, when we eat our meals, energy production, and most importantly for this video, when we go to sleep and when we wake up. Circadian rhythms rely on chemicals released in the body, and in the case of sleep, the one we need to know about is melatonin. This hormone signals to the brain that it is night time and time to go to bed. It is controlled by a part of the brain which responds to light and dark. So, looking at the slide, you can see that at around 9 p.m, or when it's dark, melatonin starts to be produced, making us feel tired and prompting us to prepare to go to sleep. When it starts to get light, this is a signal to the brain that melatonin production can stop so that we can wake up. Can you think of anything which might interfere with this circadian rhythm? You might like to stop this video and spend a few moments making a note of these. Some of the things that you might have thought of include shift work, where people have to try to sleep during the day when it's light, street lamps or lights on in the house which might trick the brain into thinking it's daytime and therefore reduce the amount of melatonin produced. Exposure to the blue light given off by electronic devices such as mobile phones and tablets. Jet lag when crossing time zones with different day and night times. Alongside our sleep-wake circadian rhythm, we have something known as our sleep drive. This is very low when we wake up and increases as the day goes on. Generally, the longer you are awake, the stronger your drive or need for sleep. This is the result of a chemical called adenosine, which builds up when our bodies produce energy. Adenosine makes you feel sleepy. The more you do during the day, the more energy you produce. The more energy you produce, the higher your adenosine levels will be by bedtime, and the easier you will find it to drop off to sleep. These rising adenosine levels are illustrated on these graphs. The first graph shows what happens to adenosine levels in someone who gets up at 7 in the morning and stays up until about 11 p.m. You will see that by bedtime levels are high, allowing them to drop off to sleep. Levels then fall during the night, meaning that they are nice and alert by the time they wake up in the morning. The second shows what happens if you don't go to bed, maybe because you are travelling or working, and then stay awake the next day. By the following evening, your adenosine levels will be very high, your drive to go to sleep will be very strong, and you will probably be feeling exhausted. The final graph demonstrates what happens if you have a daytime nap at, say, 5 p.m. in the evening. During the time you are asleep, adenosine levels will start to fall, and there might not be enough time to recover them by bedtime. For some people, this can mean that they are not tired enough to fall asleep. So, how can we use this knowledge to get a better night's sleep? Well, by increasing activity levels, we can increase adenosine levels. Be careful, however, not to exercise too late in the day, as this increases body temperature and can release adrenaline. both of which can keep you awake. Also, remember that activity is not just physical exercise. Meeting friends, doing hobbies, and problem solving all require energy and therefore produce adenosine. Some people find going to bed later builds up their adenosine levels and makes it easier to drift off. Although it decreases the overall amount of time you spend in bed, it can cut down on tossing and turning trying to get to sleep. This technique is known as sleep restriction, and it can help break the pattern of very poor sleep. You can find out more about this at this website. If you decide to try this technique, watch out for getting overtired, especially if it ends up making you feel stressed or anxious, as for some people this can be counterproductive. So, to summarise, there are two chemicals, melatonin and adenosine, which work together to encourage sleepiness at night and ensure alertness in the morning. Understanding how these work will hopefully have given you some ideas about changes you could make to get a better night's sleep. I have already mentioned some medications which can affect the sleep cycle, but let's have a think about other, what we might think of as external influences. I will look at each of these in turn. Caffeine makes you feel more alert by blocking the action of adenosine. This can be helpful if in the short term you need to stay awake, but can really affect being able to get off to sleep. Caffeine is found in varying amounts in coffee and tea, including decaf versions, energy drinks, and even some pain medications. It reaches a peak level in your blood within 30 to 60 minutes, but has a half-life of 3 to 6 hours. This means that if you have a caffeinated drink, half the caffeine will still be in your body up to 6 hours later, and up to a quarter will remain 12 hours later. Because of this, we advise limiting your caffeine intake and switching to no caffeine alternatives from lunchtime onwards. Research has also suggested that some ingredients in cigarettes, for example nicotine, are also a stimulant, and like caffeine, can make it harder to fall asleep. Contrary to popular belief, alcohol doesn't help you sleep. Whilst it can work as a sedative and make you fall asleep faster, it also works as a stimulant, meaning that your sleep will be lighter and more disturbed, leading to you waking up feeling unrefreshed. As a rule of thumb, it takes 1 hour to metabolize 1 unit of alcohol. So if you have a small glass of wine with a meal at 7 p.m, it should be cleared from your system by 9:30 p.m. and have little impact on your sleep. However, larger amounts close to bedtime will have a negative impact, particularly on the REM stage of sleep. You might remember that I talked about body temperature when explaining about circadian rhythms. This starts to drop about 2 hours before bedtime and coincides with melatonin production. By the early hours, it is around 1 to 2 degrees lower than in the day. This loss of body heat helps you to fall asleep and remain asleep. If it rises, it might cause you to wake up. For this reason, we recommend you keep the bedroom a little cooler than the rest of the house and use layers rather than heavy bedding to keep you at the right temperature. A bath before bedtime can also have the necessary cooling effect. Finally, having a regular routine supports our circadian rhythms. Try to have a period of winding down that the brain associates with preparing to go to sleep. So, what if you've tried all of these things and you still find yourself tossing and turning trying to get to sleep, or waking up frequently unable to get into or stay in a deep sleep? Well, there's no right or wrong answer, but this might depend on the thoughts and feelings that you are having. If you're warm, comfortable and relaxed, it might be that you can stay in bed and wait for sleep to come to you. Some people find it helpful to say to themselves, I may not be asleep, but I am giving my body time to rest. You could also try a mindfulness or relaxation exercise to allow your mind to rest as well. You will find podcasts and more information about relaxation and mindfulness on our website www.somersetpain.co.uk. On the other hand, if this feels more like you, it might be that struggling or fighting to go to sleep is actually making things worse and almost training your brain to associate your bedroom with this nightly battle. You may also notice that some unhelpful thoughts are creeping in. Other common sleep thoughts include, if I don't get to sleep soon, I won't be able to cope tomorrow. Why am I the only person awake? Or everyone else is asleep, leading to feelings of loneliness. This isn't fair. My pain affects everything. These feed into the vicious circle that I mentioned at the beginning of this video and are counterproductive for sleep. If you find this happening to you, you might like to consider a different approach. This involves getting up after being awake for more than around 20 minutes. Go into another room and do something relaxing like reading a book or listening to some music. Once you feel sleepy, go back to bed. If you are still awake 20 minutes later, repeat this process. This can be really difficult to do, but it can help break the cycle of struggling with sleep and reduce negative associations with the bedroom. You can find out more about this technique by listening to this podcast. I hope that this video has increased your understanding of sleep and given you some ideas for things to try. Remember, poor sleep is often something which has built up over many years, and it can take a lot of perseverance to improve it. If you make a change, give it time before you decide it's not going to work. There are lots of other resources available, and I have listed some of these on this slide. They include some apps which help you monitor and improve sleep, but please note that not all of these services are completely free of charge. You will also find out more information about sleep and other problems associated with pain on our website. Thank you for watching.